Superman and Lois is back. Season 2, Episode 1 review, discussion, and breakdown here for you today. Plus an interview with the showrunner of Superman and Lois. So much to talk about, so much to explore, and what it could mean for the rest of the season. Let's get into this one. What's going on, Superman fans? I'm your host, the Viking. Make sure you give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel because we will be breaking down every single episode of Season 2 for Superman and Lois. I love the first season so much. I thought it was perfection. I really did. The writing, the cinematography, the acting, the storylines, just everything about it was perfect and done so well. It was so different from the other Arrowverse shows completely. And Tyler Hoechlin, for me, has proved many people wrong. People laughed at him on Supergirl as Superman. But for me, he has really come into the role. And with the right material, has proved so many people wrong. My favourite Superman is Henry Cavill. He really is. But if the quality of Superman and Lois stays to this degree or gets even higher and Henry Cavill never comes back, then Tyler Hoechlin for me could be my number one Superman of all time. I really mean that because he can do no wrong for me at all. But season 1 had so much going on. You know, Superman versus Tal-Rho, who turned out to be his brother, which was a huge surprise. It was awesome action sequences between the two, great dialogue. But at the start of last season, we were introduced to the mysterious character that we found out was called Captain Luthor. But then actually it was John Henry Irons, aka Steel, who came from his Earth, where Superman went evil, killed everybody, including his wife, who was Lois Lane. He came to this Earth to kill this Earth's Superman, but eventually came around and helped Superman defeat Morgan Edge. You had Jonathan and Jordan discovering his powers. They had love interests. You had Lois Lane dealing with kind of coming to Smallville, trying to be a reporter, trying to find out information about Morgan Edge, but also dealing with past traumas, including the loss of her daughter. So the season for me was fantastic, and it ended on a big cliffhanger where John Henry Irons' daughter came from their Earth to this Earth and saw her mother Lois Lane, but it's actually not her mother, it's just a different multiverse version of her mother, and that left a huge cliffhanger where this episode picked up straight away. But I have an article from tvline.com that kind of goes through this episode, breaks it down, and then I have another article to go through where there's a big interview with the showrunner of Superman and Lois, and there's huge things to come for this season. But this comes from tvline.com. Superman and Lois boss tackles those season 2 premiere shakeups, including, spoilers, explosive arrival. Superman and Lois returned to the CW for its second season on Tuesday, introducing a new enemy, a new friend with benefits, and an otherworldly mystery that will continue to unfold in the coming weeks. Let's dive into it, shall we? Much of the drama in this first hour came from Lois and her inability to wrap her brain around the Natalie situation, constantly ping-ponging between feeling like she should be drawn to her daughter from another Earth and wondering why she isn't. It's the weirdest relationship you can imagine. Such a bizarre situation. Showrunner Todd Helbin tells TV Line, they're both emotionally strong women. So it was interesting for us writers to explore what the reality of this would be. How would you respond? You'd like to say that it's like Lois getting the daughter she lost, but she never really had a daughter. It's not the same. And for Natalie, that's not her mom. We just wanted to get into what that would really feel like for both of them. The whole ordeal forced Lois to reflect on her relationship with her own mother, whom she hasn't forgiven for leaving the Lane family all those years ago. But now, with Natalie around and her feeling nothing, Lois began to wonder if she isn't more like her mother than she thought. Clark assured his wife she's nothing like that, but it sounds like we may get to be the judges of that ourselves. Helbin confirms that we'll probably meet Lois's mom at some point in the future, though he clarifies, I don't know about this season, possibly. You learn a lot about the Lane family this season, Helvin adds. You learn about Lois and Lucy's childhood, and you learn why Sam, Lois, and Lucy are the way that they are. When Lois talks to Clark about her mom leaving, that's a foundational shift. It explains everyone's attitude and why Lucy wasn't talked about in season 1, or why Lane has never talked about his wife. Her departure was a pivotal moment in all three of their lives, when they all started to go down different paths. You'll learn about all that and what it did to Lucy's psyche and the road it took her down when she returns later this season. Meanwhile, Superman found himself at odds with Lieutenant Mitch Anderson over where his superpowered allegiance lies. For example, the smarmy army man wasn't thrilled that Clark A. saved a nuclear North Korean submarine and B. returned it to its native soil, no questions asked. When Superman made it clear that he's a servant of the world, not just of the United States, Anderson asserted that America can have more than one Superman. And that wasn't just talk. The episode introduced us to a pair of superpowered recruits who assisted with the military's rescue efforts after a mine explosion triggered an earthquake. Speaking of that earthquake, the final moments of the episode took us back down into the mines where we caught a glimpse of what was really responsible for those tremors. But all Helbin will say of that giant hand is this. I'm assuming a lot of people will know what it is. In episode 2, you'll see a little bit more. And in episode 3, you'll find out exactly what it is. Also, let's go through what else happened in this episode. Lois walked in on Jonathan and his girlfriend Candace getting down to business, prompting Clark to deliver what could have been a very awkward sex talk. Kudos to Clark for managing to avoid being too cringy, instead just laying it all out there like a mature adult. That said, you may be wondering why Jonathan is suddenly dating a girl named Candace. When last we saw him, Jonathan was cozying up to Tegan, whose father was imprisoned in Central City. Spoiler alert, you can kiss that storyline goodbye. You know how teenagers are, Helbin says. You date someone for a month and then it's over. In those 3 months, he and Tegan broke up and he started dating Candace. In other relationship news, Sarah returned from summer camp this week, but it wasn't the happy homecoming Jordan was expecting. She didn't love that he showed up at her house without texting first, and even though they shared a kiss at the site of their infamous arrest, it wasn't exactly a passionate lip lock. Kyle later reminded his daughter that she's the alpha in her relationship and that she needs to be honest with Jordan about however she's really feeling. The season premiere was directed by Arrowverse stable David Ramsey, but he won't stay behind the camera for long. Helbin confirms that we will see him again as John Diggle in the near future. So that's mostly everything that happened in episode 1 of Superman Lois season 2. I thought it was a pretty good opener for this season. I like some of the stuff and storylines that it set up, especially the kind of discussion between Superman and Lieutenant Mitch Anderson. There's definitely going to be a rivalry between those two right there because the American government wants Superman to act on their own accord, but Superman's like, I act for the world, I save the world, not just America, because they weren't happy that he saved that North Korean submarine and they have nuclear weapons and he put them back exactly where they were working. And the lieutenant was like, what are you doing? And Clark is saying, I don't work for you, I work for everybody, I will help you, but I'm here to save the world, help everybody that I can. I don't get involved in the politics of it all, which I found very interesting. That was a really great scene. And then the lieutenant brings in kind of 2 up-and-coming superheroes to do work for him, but then Superman's like, that's dangerous. It's okay saving people from an earthquake, but there's real threats out there. They're not able for that yet. So there's going to be a rivalry between those 2 characters, and I love the setup so far. And then at the end of the episode, that hand, who is it? People are saying Doomsday Online. That will be pretty interesting. The last time we got to see that character was in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, and I thought the character was pretty amazing in that as well. So I would love to see more of that between Superman and Doomsday going down the line. The stuff with Lois, you can see that she's on edge. She's very snappy towards her husband and her kids, but she doesn't know how to feel about this girl who actually from another universe is her daughter, and what she should do with her, because on this earth, Lois Lane was pregnant with a daughter, and the daughter passed away. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. So there's a lot of trauma there, and then you have the young girl Natalie who is seeing her mother, but it's not actually her mother. So I find that interesting. I really do. And John Henry Irons, for me, the actor that plays that character, he's a fantastic actor. I would love to see him suit up even more. But Superman did say that he's done when he was talking to the lieutenant Mitch Anderson, so we'll have to see, but he'll probably pop up in the suit again. But I like the storylines. I really, really did the stuff with Jordan and Sarah. I think the reason she's being cold towards Jordan is because she met somebody else at summer camp and doesn't know how to tell him. That's my prediction so far. We'll have to see how it develops. But I have another article from denofgeek.com that talks about this episode, and also a very interesting interview with the showrunner that gives away some of the stuff that we can expect going forward. Not spoilers, but just hints of what we can expect. Superman and Lois Season 2 premiere, the secrets of the ending and what's next. The Superman and Lois Season 2 premiere, What Lies Beneath, doesn't give away any indication that this show will be slowing down after its spectacular first year. If anything, it feels like it's giving us everything that worked in that first season, but just a little bit amplified. The emotional stakes of Lois, Clark, Jonathan and Jordan's home lives have been raised, while the big Superman-focused action scenes are some of the most spectacular on TV, and from the looks of things, they're going to get even bigger. With Jordan's romance with Sarah Cushing apparently fizzling, Jonathan's sex life apparently blooming, Tyler Hoechlin's comedic timing as Clark Kent even more weirdly perfect than it's ever been, and Elizabeth Tulloch bringing emotional depth to Lois Lane with virtually every scene. Well, who needs superheroes and supervillains, right? Oh, who are we kidding? We all need them. Just to add something to that, I have to say Elizabeth Tulloch as Lois Lane, her acting has been absolutely fantastic. I love her in the role, I really, really do. And that's why this episode also delivers what might be its most cinematic moment yet, as Superman rescues a North Korean nuclear submarine, an action that lands him in hot water with the DEO, and introduces some new potential antagonists in the mysterious Superman of America. It seems the DEO doesn't like the idea of the Man of Steel saving enemy lives. And then there's the little matter of John Henry and Natalie Irons trying to adjust to life on our world, a complicating factor in Lois's life, considering that as far as Natalie is concerned, Lois is still her mother. That introductory scene with Natalie and Lois is one of the most powerful moments the series has ever done, and it happens in the very opening of this episode. Pretty packed, right? Yes, and then the final moments of the episode go ahead and up the stakes in a completely different way by teasing the introduction of notoriously deadly Superman foe Doomsday in an almost perfect recreation of the character's first appearance from the comics. That can only mean one thing, right? Well, not necessarily, especially since this show has made its name so far by subverting exactly those kinds of comic book expectations. Superman and Lois Season 2 looks like it's going to be packed, and we spoke to executive producer Todd Helbin to get the scoop on what it all means and what's coming next. Doomsday. This is the question he was asked. When we spoke after the season finale and I asked you about the upcoming villains, you said how you and Greg Berlanti said, if we're going to do this, how are we going to make it different? And right out of the gate this season, you're going with Doomsday. The minute the audience sees Doomsday, they only think of one thing, and that's the death of Superman's story. So what made you do this in the season 2 premiere? Todd Helbin had this to say. To that point of doing it differently, what we love to do as a writing staff with Greg and just generally is to take different parts of the mythology and combine them, like we did with Morgan Edge and the Eradicator and the Half-Brother story. So with Doomsday, we wanted to find ways that we could take that character and find a new way to define an introduction and sort of flip it on its head. There's a tease, obviously, in this episode. Episode 2, you will get a little bit more, and then in episode 3, you will get the full reveal. Another question. You also said when it comes to choosing villains, you said it doesn't have to be somebody that can punch as hard as Superman. He said this, while I was probably talking about other villains, we have multiple villains this season. They all sort of start at different times and they're necessarily not connected. But then you'll see how they all start to fall into place with each other. Question. John Henry Irons and Natalie Irons. That opening scene is really powerful and picks up the minute after the closing moments of the finale. Was that filmed at the same time? Did you always know that was the next beat from that scene? He said this, we didn't film it at the same time. The problem in Vancouver is when you wrap in July and then we don't shoot till September, the crops grow really quite a bit differently. We didn't know how it was going to play out. It wasn't until we started talking about Lois and Clark and the boys and the history of the Lane family that it tied into Natalie and John Henry and what a real life reaction in such a strange circumstance would be like. Question: all the stuff with Natalie and John was very powerful. Was any of their arc for this season in the back of everybody's minds already last season? He had this to say: last year, because of COVID and shutting down a couple of times and just the craziness of shooting a television show during a pandemic, we didn't really have the normal time that we would have. Particularly, we knew we wanted to go back in January, so on the writing side, we had to start up. I mean, we got like 2 days off. We didn't have the luxury of time this time around. We just work with a lot of really talented writers. A writer's room in place where you should be able to open up and talk about things you don't normally talk about. I think when we started talking about Lois and Sam Lane, we knew we wanted to bring Lucy Lane in. We wanted to explain the relationship between Sam and Lois and go deeper. We want to do that with all of the families this season and really get into their backstories and secrets and tell who they really are. Some of the pain they've experienced in their lives and why it explains who they are right now and why Lois has this ability to compartmentalize. In a writer's room, it just takes one idea, and if it fits, it has a tendency to shadow all of the other storylines. That was the seed that led to a whole bunch of stories this season for all three of our families. The potential for crossovers. Question: did you have more freedom filming this season? Are there things that you were able to attempt this season that you weren't able to last year? He said this: well, I think we just figured out by the end of the season the protocols in regards to how long certain things take. We got used to the time constraints. Now I think we're just a little bit more educated. So it did open up a little bit more. Not as much as if there wasn't a pandemic, but enough so it felt like we could push the story in some direction. Question: does that mean we might see other DC heroes this season? He had this to say: you'll see a few. Not a lot. I mean, are you referring to crossovers and stuff? And the interviewer goes, yes. Helbin had this to say: coming into the show last season, there was this expectation we're going to do this crossover with Batwoman. You know, everyone was like, well, this is how we do these shows. And then with the pandemic, it slowly took all of that potential away, and we wound up just doing our own thing as every other show did. The further along that we went, the harder it became to have anybody even come to set. It just wasn't allowed. So we just made the decision to do our own thing. If John Diggle is literally the only person we can have come over, then we just do our own thing and we'll see when the pandemic lifts how we can shift all of this. Omicron is rearing its head right now and it's problematic for sure. But I don't know. We'll just take it day by day and we'll see how things unfold. Right now, there's not any more than there were last year, but we'll see in the future. We have a pretty big cast. I don't think anybody's going to be too concerned about it. Truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. Question: this episode gets into one of the philosophical issues surrounding Superman. Most importantly, about where he owes his allegiance to. Is it America or the entire world? What made this the right time to explore this theme? He had this to say: well, I think once we made the decision for Sam Lane to step down from the DEO, it opened up a lot of story problems. Not for us, but for the characters. It just felt like an organic time for Superman to explain what his philosophy is to a new person who's trying to handle him in a way that he doesn't know how to. Superman had a lot of leeway with Sam because Sam knew his secret, but Mitchell Anderson doesn't. When Superman's speeding off, Sam knew he was very likely going to see his daughter or going to see his grandsons, and he was fine with it. Superman didn't have to explain why. If he went to North Korea to save this sub, he wouldn't have to explain it because Sam sort of smoothed that over with his superiors in a way that Anderson just doesn't have the ability to because he doesn't know what the answer is, because Superman won't tell him. He's just not privy to that information that Sam was. So it just felt like a good time where Superman could say to this guy, I don't have an allegiance to anybody. I have an allegiance to everybody. Question: speaking of that scene with the North Korean sub, this show has been really good about giving us Superman moments that we haven't seen done in live action. Saving a submarine. I can't remember even seeing that in live action. The bit with the super Brett and the water tower is really clever use of his powers that we haven't seen before. Obviously, this stuff has to fit the story, and the submarine is very important to the larger story that you're telling here. That writer's room obviously has a lot of serious Superman fans in there. How conscious are you of trying to pick moments like that people have never seen the character do before with his powers in that way? He had this to say: it's kind of our North Star. We said from the beginning, if you're going to do Superman, how do you do it different? So that is reflected, or we try to reflect that in all of our set pieces too. In a world where there's multiple superhero shows, they've been on for almost a decade or over a decade, like every night. It feels like you have to find ways to reinvent yourself. Last season, I think what we got pretty confident in was putting Superman in places in the world that you haven't seen him in before and finding these little nuggets that exist in our world where it would be really cool if fighting somebody or saving something. We have a couple of set pieces coming up later this season that are just really cool environments, and kudos to our VFX team. We have this saying, whenever we know that something's going to be a huge challenge to pull off in the time that we have, we just say, hey, it's Superman. We joke about it, but there's so much truth to that. It's because it's this show, and it's this character, and it's this type of different stories that we're going to tell. So everybody brings their A game, and we just like the challenge, and we like to challenge ourselves and see if we can give a little movie on the small screen each week. Question. Next week, David Ramsey is directing. Last season, he directed what I personally think was the pivotal episode of the season. Can we expect something similar? Every time we see his name as director, it is going to be one of those episodes that changes how we perceive the show. He replied, I mean, his episode is awesome, for sure. I will go on record saying every episode that he directs is going to be awesome. He's an unbelievably talented guy, but it's not the way that our schedules work. You know, half the time we book directors before the scripts are written. We knew last season, because we were a little bit further out, script-wise, we knew that his skill set would be particularly awesome in episode 7, but sometimes you get scripts that just don't line up exactly the way that they did for that episode. It's just firing on all cylinders with that one. But yeah, I agree, 7 is one of my favourites. Mitchell Anderson and the Supermen of America. Question. Mitchell Anderson is obviously an important character this season. Is it coincidental that he shares a name with the character from the comics who also is connected to the Supermen of America and has a loose connection to Doomsday? He had this to say. It's not a coincidence. Sometimes we choose names from the comics and we have intentions of doing X, Y, or Z. But then as the story progresses and tells us which way it's going, sometimes our initial hopes don't work out. But a lot of times they do. I will say that Anderson was chosen because of Supermen of America and his connection to that, and you'll see how that really plays out this season. That was an interview with the showrunner for Superman and Lois, which I found very interesting and gives so much backstory to the intentions of Superman and Lois for season 2. So I'm very interested to see how this season progresses, especially with Doomsday being introduced at the end and Lieutenant Mitch Anderson, that kind of rivalry with Superman already, and he's bringing in his own superheroes to do the job that America wants done. It's going to be very interesting how all of that is tackled. Jordan and his powers will be explored even more. I wonder if Jonathan will end up having powers. That would be pretty cool. There's also the love interest there. You got Lois and Natalie. That relationship. John Henry Irons as well. He'll have to be given something to do this season as well. So, because I love that character. So I hope he has something very interesting as well. And the showrunner did say, don't expect too many crossovers and stuff like that. But he did say that a few heroes could show up. Now, who could that be? I don't know. I'm very intrigued to see what happens there. Lois Lane's sister Lucy will be showing up as well. Their relationship will be explored, the backstory of their mother leaving too, and also we will get John Diggle back this season as well. So there's so much to look forward to, and I have to say, the action sequences, the VFX have been amazing. It looked like a movie. They do. I love Superman saving that submarine, just the shots, everything was pretty cool. So this episode out of 10, I will give this episode an 8.5 out of 10. I think it was solid for a season premiere. It laid down a lot of foundation of what to expect for this season. But for me, the series is just brilliant. I love every single episode. I love the characters. I love the storylines. It just makes me happy watching this show. I think it's well directed, well written. And I'm looking forward to episode 2 already. So 8.5 for me. Let me know your thoughts below, guys. What's your rating out of 10? Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss next week's breakdown review for Superman Lois episode 2. Guys, thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next week and enjoy.